Good evening. Hello again, everybody. Welcome. Anybody who's a first-timer. My name's Clare, and this is the fifth night that I've been here leading the meditations, and I forget who's up next. Who? Damien, who's been doing all the technical work. So Damien will be here next week to do August. I thought I'd talk tonight. I'll start again with the bodhicitta and refuge prayer, and again I'll just quickly run over what that means for anyone who's new. Before in the Tibetan tradition, and in all traditions they have their own versions of these things, we say a prayer that we call taking refuge and bodhicitta, so going for refuge to the Buddha, and so turning our mind towards a being that we believe has become completely blissfully happy while still existing in the mud that is the world, that is suffering, but managing to stay peaceful and happy. And then he taught others how to do this. And then the bodhicitta is the wish that, with this understanding that you can free your mind, and having moments of peace in meditation and realising that that's a great thing, and it would be lovely if everybody meditated and had moments like these, there'd be a much more peaceful existence in the world. We wish that we ourselves could reach this state and then be able to guide others to do it, or to be able to be of more benefit to others. But at the moment we're kind of struggling to keep ourselves afloat, let alone help anybody else. But it's this wish that, understanding our own suffering, you then understand that all others are suffering at the same level, and worse, and whatever. You become more sort of empathetic, and understanding of others' suffering, and really thinking, well, it's not good. I would really like to be able to help all other beings out of their suffering, whether they're our enemies or friends or strangers. All beings are suffering, so that by understanding our own plight, and we want to be free, then it follows that everybody else wants to be free as well. So we turn our minds towards these thoughts before we start any of the teachings and meditations. So I'll just go through the prayer. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma and the highest assembly, from the virtuous merit that I collect by practicing giving and the other perfections. May I attain the state of a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma and the highest assembly, from the virtuous merit that I collect by practicing giving and the other perfections. May I attain the state of a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma and the highest assembly, from the virtuous merit that I collect by practicing giving and the other perfections. May I attain the state of a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. So I was talking to someone the other night, and they were asking, like when we open it up to questions, he said to me in the tea room, I have thousands of questions, but I didn't kind of dare ask anything. And one of his questions was about some of the ritual aspects, because Buddhism is very practical, and His Holiness himself in some of the teachings recently has been saying quite bluntly he would prefer not to call Buddhism a religion, it's a science. And he himself, if you know anything about the Dalai Lama, loves modern science, loves physics, loves hanging out with scientists and finding out what they're discovering and what they're thinking, and then sharing what he understands with them, and that scientists are learning from him. And actually talking yesterday to someone, there has always been this thing in science that the mind is the brain. They always associate the mind with the brain, and the functionings of the mind are the brain itself, the chemical actions, the chemical reactions in the brain. But in more recent times, and Buddhism would say the mind is separate, it's not physical. So that all the chemicals and the electrical things that are going on in our brains are actually, that's physical matter. And our mind is dependent on that, works interdependently with that. But in recent times in some science, and I can't quote who, and I have heard it myself, that some scientists are sort of saying, well, actually we can't really find the mind in the chemicals in the brain, or the cells in the brain, or the atoms in the brain, and that there is some sense that there is something else interconnecting with so that modern science is kind of catching up to Buddhism in a way. That these thoughts that have been 2,500 years old, and this is why the Dalai Lama is not afraid of science, because you can, it's an analytical process. And that if you find something wrong, then you've found something wrong. If you question and there are faults, then there are faults. So there's a whole big thing in Buddhism about debate. If you've ever seen any of you can Google it, the Tibetan monks debating in the monastery, the Sera monastery, and they have a whole debating ground, they call it, outside, and every day they go through this process of reading and studying and then debating what they're learning and questioning everything. And it's very, very important, because it has to be real. It's got to make sense. So this is one of the things, and I think a lot of Westerners are attracted to Buddhism for this reason, that there's no dogma as such. That it doesn't work, and blind faith doesn't work. So they don't encourage blind faith either. That there is a place for faith, you know, like if something's working for you, then you can put your faith in that and believe. But it's based on very practical, analytical things. So, having said that, there appears to be a lot of ritual in around the practices here, and you know, one of the things you might have seen, some people will come in and prostrate. I generally will prostrate before a teaching, and before listening to a teaching. And if you've ever come in on a Wednesday night, I remember the first time I did, and it took me by surprise. I didn't realise, and everyone starts to prostrate in the room, and you're standing there and all these people are prostrating. But what they're doing, there's a lot going on there. What's happening is you'll find the teacher prostrates, Geshe Doga will come in and prostrate, the Dalai Lama will prostrate, and then we prostrate to them, but we're also prostrating to the thing that they're prostrating to. And the bottom line is the Dharma, the actual teachings is what we're bowing down to, because it's the teachings that will free us. It's this philosophy that's so helpful, and there's also the teacher will prostrate to the throne before they sit on it, because that is the seat of the teachings, and so it lessens their pride, or eliminates any pride before they sit down, because they're prostrating to the same thing. And so when you actually prostrate, you touch your forehead to the ground, and it's one of these, it's a meditation. You visualise all your negativities in the form of black smoke or black oil or something coming out of you and disappearing completely into the ground. And as you stand up, you bless your body your speech and your mind. And you'll find that's what people do. And we do it 3 times, and again, that's body, speech and mind. And yeah, so you just think about the light coming from the Buddhas and the teachings and blessing your body, speech and mind. So and that's a purification for yourself before you sit down to listen to a teaching. It's a very nice practice. And there's a practice of full prostrations, when you actually lie down on the ground and do a full prostration. And that's actually good exercise. It's sort of, I remember Geshe-Doka, we were having lunch with Geshe-Doka, and we were talking about fitness and exercise and what we all do, and there was one person sitting there saying, oh no, I couldn't do that. And then, no, I can't run, and no, I can't swim, oh no, I couldn't possibly do that. Yoga, no, I'm not interested in that. And then Geshe just goes, prostrations. So it's like the salute to the sun, actually, when you're doing the full prostration. So it's good exercise as well as good exercise for your mind. You're purifying while you're doing something physical. And there is, if you do yoga, you know that how that can clear your mind. There is, it's really good to do yoga as well, as perhaps a preliminary to sitting down to meditate, because that will focus your mind, help relax you and focus your mind before you sit down to meditate. What else? There's things like we don't point our feet towards the Buddhas. And you don't know this until someone points it out. So I'm sort of thinking, well, this is Monday nights is a good time to tell you, because you don't know, and it's not a problem if you do, and you've done it out of not knowing. It's not, nobody worries, and least of all will Geshe-Doka worry if somebody does that. But what it is we take our shoes off because we've left all the dirt out there, and it's also just this, it's another mental process that our negativities, it's just the dirt that you're touching the ground with your feet, so there's sort of dirt and negative stuff, so you don't point them towards the Buddhas. It's just a simple thing. And it's part of this mindfulness thing. I think I was saying at the end of last week to just be watching your mind all the time. And with some of these practices, it just helps you to be very mindful of what you're doing, which is really good for you. It's sort of, rather than letting your mind control everything that is going on, you're actually watching it and taking some control over it. The other thing is, another thing is with the books. You'll see we've got a whole stack of little tables there. Any books or Dharma, we generally don't put them, it's not good to put them on the floor for the same reason as, there's dirt and negativities, and it's a sort of mental mindfulness of not putting things on the floor. So if you came in on a Wednesday night and the prayer books are there, and it's in English and Tibetan. We do some Tibetan chanting, do the prayers in Tibetan, but the English translation is there. So you'd grab a little table or put them on some cushions. We used to use cushions before we used the tables. Yes. Feet on the cushions is fine. Yeah, that's fine. And people do it to prop yourself up. It actually helps with your meditation. So it's probably preferable to use one of the tables, because we've had our feet on the cushions and our butts on the cushions. So it's probably a nicer thing to do, to use the little tables. Or your handbag. Sometimes if I'll come to something and I haven't got a cushion or a thing, I'll just, you can just rest things on a bag or something, but just not on the floor. Because, and the big thing is, this is what's going to save us. This is what's precious. The words, the teachings themselves is what's the most precious. And when we say we go to refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha, the Buddha taught this stuff, but it's the stuff that is what we need. So it's like the Buddha's the doctor. The highest assembly are like the teachers, so the Sangha, like Geshe Doga, people that have realised a lot of these practices, and through their experience, when they teach, it's very powerful. When you're listening to someone who has had a lifetime's experience with this, and you'd assume that their meditation practice is pretty deep, and when they teach, you really get something from them. You get a blessing that just through the power of their experience. So they're the ones who teach it to us, the highest assembly. But it's the Dharma that is the information that we need to. So they're like the nurses, I suppose, the teachers, and then this is the medicine. All right, so we've been talking about the Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering, I'll just run quickly over, just briefly over what we've been doing, the truth of suffering. So there's three types of suffering. The suffering of suffering, physical and mental, that we all understand as quite obvious and gross kind of suffering. The suffering of change, which we don't always recognise. We usually pleasurable things especially that we grasp onto, and then they change or they die, or we don't get them, you know, all of these things that we see as pleasurable end in suffering. So that's the suffering of change. And then the all-pervasive suffering is really by virtue of our lack of understanding, our lack of wisdom, that we're born, it's just by virtue of being born that we will suffer. It's an all-pervasive suffering. The birth is suffering, and then we immediately begin the process of ageing. Even though, you know, little children are perfect, but they're actually getting closer to their own demise. You know? So it's the beginning of the process heading towards the end of being born. And then through just being born, we have to go through sickness, old age and death. So there is just this all-pervasive kind of suffering. Three types of suffering. So then there's the causes of suffering. So we can always find, you know, physical causes. It's easy to sort of track to what a physical cause for suffering. If you bang your hand or bump yourself, there are causes, but that could be a lack of mindfulness as well. And they basically say that all suffering comes down to kind of mental processes, so that even physical suffering is mostly a mental suffering. And the reason that we suffer is because of our attachment, and we grasp onto things as the be-all and end-all of our happiness. And when we're disappointed with that, we suffer. And we grasp onto our physical, we want to be immortal. But when we're sick and die, you know, it's suffering and we're confused. But it's mostly, then it still comes back to a mental, we're suffering because we're grasping. So again, it comes back to a mental thing. If we didn't grasp, we wouldn't be freaking out so much, whether it's a physical or emotional pain that we're suffering. And then there's the cessation. So there is an end to suffering. And like I say, if we weren't grasping onto things, if we didn't have so much attachment, we didn't have so much anger and pride and jealousy and all of these things that go on in our minds endlessly throughout the day. You can go through all these motions around and around and around all day, every day. If we didn't have these things, we wouldn't have these things. And we would have a space, we'd have a sense of freedom and peace if we weren't constantly doing this. So and just the logic of that, if we could sort of stop doing that, then we're going to end or minimise our suffering. And then there's the path to suffering. The fourth noble truth is the path to suffering, the path to the freedom from suffering, the path to cessation. So as I said last week, there's the 8, what did I call them? The 8 noble paths or something, the eightfold path it's referred to as. And so that's basically all of our behaviours in our work, our life, our everything that we do. If we do them in I can't remember the eightfold path. I'll look it up in a minute. I had it in my head and I've lost it now. I can Google it. If some... First one's understanding. Right understanding. That's right. So there's right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right thought. I think the second one is thought. That's intention. Thought and intention are together. So you've got right action, right livelihood. How many is that? So we'll go through them again. Right understanding, right thought or intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood. Right mindfulness. Concentration, yeah, well, all those sorts of things. So it's sort of understanding and intention are important. So right understanding is understanding this stuff, making sense of it, and not going off in your own tangent with it, doing your own version. It's not going to work. And so you might find, there might be groups, hippy-trippy, sort of interesting. It might be interesting and helpful to people. I'm not really, there are things out there that people do that get involved in, and it helps them, and whatever works for you. But as far as Buddhism is saying, if you're going to do the Buddha's kind of meditation, it's really good to do it properly, the way the Buddha taught. And it has come down through a lineage from the Buddha himself. There is an unbroken lineage of he taught people that taught people that taught people, and they had the realizations, and they relied on spiritual teachers to guide them as well. And there is a direct lineage straight back to the Buddha. So right intention is and right thought. So before you do anything, it's a thought. You're driven by your thoughts. And so then you've got right speech and right action, right livelihood, everything that you do. When they talk about right livelihood, you've got to be careful about your choice of livelihood, not to be killing animals, and they say not to serve alcohol. I worked in bars for years, and so things like that. If you want to, and it's, you can still do those things and do this. It really, but if you were mindful about it, then you'd be saying mantras and prayers. You'd be sort of trying to keep your mind. It's about keeping your mind in a really good place. So that if you're killing animals, if you work at the abattoir or something and you're involved in that, it's just going to have this impact on your mind of the habit of killing, and that's not, necessarily a positive kind of thinking. So you would be mindful, and you would maybe bless the animals and stuff like that. So whatever you're doing, you try to think carefully about it. There was, and I'm not, I'm not saying you should do this, but there was a girl that came here, and she was a scientist, and they were working with mice, and so she actually stopped. She changed her career, which was a huge leap. But so you can make those sort of choices, and I think it made her happier. She felt better for it. It wasn't that she gave up her life. So you're just trying to keep your mind in a very positive place. Then, I can't remember what the last one is, but the ultimate cessation is to understand this. All of our negativities, all of our attachment, aversion and lack of wisdom come from not understanding that there's nothing there worth freaking out so much about. We just don't need to be getting as upset as we can. And I'll lead a meditation. And a lot of you, some of you people have been coming to Monday nights for quite a while and have come to the other teachings and have heard the term of emptiness. And all of these teachings lead to this final kind of understanding. But you need to be practicing love and compassion and mindfulness to be able to develop your concentration. And then when you've developed your concentration, you can really think deeply about how things exist, so that the two work together. So you don't just sort of think, right, I'm going to study emptiness and I'll get liberated, because it doesn't work that way. You need the love and compassion side of it as well to actually purify your mind enough that you can concentrate and meditate on it with wisdom. So I'll just reiterate that love in Buddhism is talking about wishing the other to be happy. Normally we love, and we love the people that make us happy. And, there's nothing wrong with that. But as soon as they don't make us happy, then we're cross with them and we don't love them anymore. So that's love mixed with attachment. And attachment is getting for oneself, getting something out of a situation or a person or a thing for oneself, and that's why we're really attached. But love is wishing the other to be happy. So no matter what happens or how badly behaved they are, we're still wishing them to be happy. And one way of getting your head around this, especially with enemies, is to think, well, when I'm wishing you to be happy, I'm not saying be happy in your bad behaviour. I'm wishing you to be happy the same way I want myself to be happy. And I've learnt that the only way to be happy is to be virtuous, is to do good things and to clear my mind of negativities. And that's how one gets happy. So that I wish that for you. I wish that the sadness or the anger or the fear that's driving you, I wish you didn't have that. And when you meditate on your enemy, you can see that they are driven by these things, and then you can develop compassion for them. And compassion means wishing them to be free from their suffering. And so we're sort of learning that the suffering is caused by all these negativities, negative states of mind. So that if our enemy was free of these negative states of mind, they wouldn't be behaving the way they were. We would be happier around them, and they would be happier in their relationships with people. So there is a way to actually really confront your enemy in your mind and wish them to be happy and to be free from suffering. And that's what compassion is. And compassion isn't, it's not a pitying thing. It's not like, oh, I feel so sorry for you, you're so badly behaved. It's you're feeling their pain and you want them to be free of that. You're actually really feeling their pain and wanting them to be free of that the way you would be free yourself. And it's not taking on the pain, it's not taking on their problems to the point where you're overwhelmed. And, you know, looking at the suffering in the world, it's very easy to get overwhelmed. And people get what, you know, I have a friend who has worked, she worked with the East Timorese for many years, and there's still a lot of problems there. But, and people from the United Nations and all these great organisations and stuff are working there. But they get worn down, the enormity of the problems, and you see it in a lot of countries, the enormity of what you're dealing with and the suffering, and it wears people down and they get compassion fatigue. But if you're doing this right, if you're practicing these meditations and thinking about these things, you won't actually get fatigued, you won't be overwhelmed. The Dalai Lama spent his whole life endlessly for his people, talking about the plight of his country and his people, but he's still he's happy, and he has this joyous effort. He has this ability to just keep going and keep doing it because he's actually purified his own mind. There's no self-interest there. There's no worry about him feeling sad or sorry, because he doesn't have that grasping that feels sad and sorry. So he can just endlessly, with what he's achieved in his own mind, he can just endlessly give and give and give to people and work tirelessly. And even his minders will sort of stop him from teaching and force him to take a break every now and then, but he will keep going. And his mind is completely clear and completely happy, and that's what he lives for, is just to endlessly work tirelessly for us, teaching all the time, and tirelessly for his country, for his people, without getting overwhelmed by it. And it's been, since 1950 he's been doing this, so he's a great example. Geshe Doga is a great example of this as well. All right, we'll do this nice little meditation on emptiness. So emptiness, I should talk about it a bit first. I've referenced it a lot throughout these weeks, but the word emptiness, and there's no other word in English that I think that they could bring to it. It's that things do not exist independently and permanently and unceasingly as we perceive them to be. So that, and it starts with the self as well, that we perceive ourselves, we do feel immortal. We're not really aware of of death. We're not thinking about it all the time, or we're not aware that that's kind of where we're going to go, even though we know intellectually. But we feel that there's this very sort of permanent, solid person here who is independent of any other existence. It's just Clare here. But I came from my parents, so without a mother and a father, I don't exist. So right there, I'm dependent on having had a mother and a father. That's how I came into existence. I'm dependent on having been nurtured and kept alive. I'm dependent on all the food that I've eaten all my life. I'm dependent on all the people that I've ever had anything to do with in my education and my family and my friends. And that has all, I'm completely dependent on all of that. That has shaped who I am. And all of the things that happen in one's life determine kind of how one thinks and feels. And all of your previous thoughts determine the next thought So that I can't say that, and if this was this solid, this independently existing Clare sitting here, when I was born and when I was a baby, before they called me Clare, I would have had to have been recognised as Clare, and I couldn't change my name because I couldn't be anything other than Clare. So there's just a label on me that says Clare. And everything is labelled, and labelled by our minds. We put labels onto everything. So a book has come from trees, and there's some ink there that somebody made, and the ink had to come from somewhere. Something was crushed up and made into ink and written on here, and there were printing machines involved, and there were endless numbers of people involved. And there was Kathleen MacDonald who wrote it, and all of her thoughts and all of her teachings and all of the teachers that she's ever heard and all of the thinking that she's ever done exists here. So we look at book, but there's so much else that it can't exist without. And Thich Nhat Hanh, I don't know if some of you will have heard of Thich Nhat Hanh. He, the Tibetan, Vietnamese monk who he won the Nobel Peace Prize during the Vietnam War, or just after the Vietnam War, for helping people during the Vietnam War. And he's written lots of lovely, lovely books. Thich Nhat Hanh, his name is, and if you ever see anything by him, they're very, very readable, very lovely to read. But he often refers to seeing the sun and the moon and the rain and the wind in everything. He's seeing the whole cosmos in a book, because the sun and the wind and the rain are here. Because without them you couldn't have grown the trees that went into making the paper. And it's the same for us, all of the food that we eat, that everything, and the people involved in bringing the food are part of us. Without them we wouldn't exist. Without all of these things we wouldn't actually exist. So we're interdependent with so many causes and conditions, mentally and physically. And so this is why, to be able to really focus and meditate on these things has this effect on your mind of loosening this grip on this solidly existing thing. And things do exist, but we seem to endow them. We do this thing of exaggerating, and because we grasp at them, we then tell ourselves stories, like I was talking a few weeks ago. We create exaggerations. And this thing's going to make me so happy because it's so incredibly fabulous, without realising it's only just this mass of causes and conditions that come into existence through being interdependent with all of these other things, and dependent on my mind projecting onto it, my mind creating the story, my mind making it a solid, real thing that's going to make me solidly and really happy. Okay, so that's a kind of introduction. It's a huge philosophical thing, and this is what all of the teachings and all of the debates come down to. But without love and compassion you can't meditate on these things either. And it's because having an understanding of this, you also, it deepens your love and compassion. When you when you have these moments of sort of realising, okay, it's the world is not this solid, and people are not these sort of solid entities that make me happy or angry. And if I can let that go, I will be so much happier. And by realising that by letting it go, I do get happier. And when I meditate personally, I have moments of, what was all the fuss about? And you can sort of get up and walk away, and you've let go of whatever it is that was stressing you. So by understanding that, and bringing your understanding of that to other people, you deepen your love and compassion. And then by deepening your love and compassion, you're clearing your mind more of negativity. And then by clearing your mind more of negativity, you're more able to have wisdom and understand things. So they work together. All right, we'll do this meditation. So now, just being relaxed, very relaxed, but with your spine straight. Relax your shoulders and your arms and tilt your head slightly. And bringing your mind inward. Just focusing on the breath for a while. Just bringing your focus right in and following the inward and outward of the breath. So emptiness can sound pretty abstract, but in fact is very practical and relevant to our lives. The first step toward understanding it is to try and get an idea of what it is we think does exist. To locate, for example, the I that we believe in so strongly, and then by using clear reasoning in analytical meditation to see that it is a mere fabrication, something that has never existed and could never exist in the first place. But you don't throw out too much. You definitely exist. There is a conventional, interdependent self that experiences happiness and suffering, that works, studies, eats, sleeps, meditates, and becomes enlightened. The first, most difficult task is to distinguish between this valid I and the fabricated one. Usually we cannot tell them apart. In the concentration of meditation, it's possible to see the difference, to recognise the illusory I and eradicate our long habituated belief in it. The meditation here is a practical first step in that direction. So just relaxing and calm your mind. We'll motivate strongly to do this meditation in order to finally become enlightened for the sake of all beings. And now, with the alertness of a spy, slowly and carefully become aware of the I. Who or what is it that thinks, feels and meditates? How does it appear to you? Is your I a creation of your mind? Or is there something that exists concretely and independently in its own right? Now try to locate it. Where is this I? Is it in your head? In your eyes? In your heart? In your hands? In your stomach? In your feet? Carefully consider each part of your body, including the organs, blood vessels, and nerves. Can you find your I? It might be very small and subtle, So consider the cells, the atoms, the subatomic particles. If you do think that your eye is a part of the body, then what would happen if that part were removed in an operation or damaged in an accident? And what happens to the eye when your body ceases to function at death? Perhaps you think your mind is the eye. The mind is a constantly changing stream of thoughts, feelings, and other experiences, coming and going in rapid succession. It's never the same from one moment to the next. Which of these experiences is the I? Is it a loving thought? An angry thought? A happy feeling? A depressed feeling? If you think that your I is one of these experiences, then what happens to it when that kind of experience is not present in your mind? If your I is love, for example, then when your mind is filled with only anger, does the I go somewhere else or disappear altogether? Is there no I at that time? Or maybe you have many I's, an angry one, a loving one, a frightened one, etc. If you cannot find your I in your body or your mind, then could it be something else? Is there some extra part of you other than your body and mind? After all, we say my body and my mind, implying the existence of something else who owns these two. If so, what is it? Where is it found? What kind of phenomena is it? Examine every possibility you can think of. Again, look at the way your I actually appears, how it feels to you. After this search for the I, do you notice any change? Do you still believe that it is as solid and real as you felt before? Does it still appear to exist independently in and of itself? Next, mentally disintegrate your body. Imagine all the atoms separating and floating apart. Billions and billions of minute particles scatter throughout space. Imagine that you can actually see this. Now disintegrate your mind. Let every thought, feeling, sensation and perception float away. Then check your feeling of I. Where is it and what is it? Don't make the mistake of thinking my body is not the I and my mind is not the I, therefore I don't exist. You do exist, but not in the way you instinctively feel, as something independent and inherent. Conventionally, your self exists in dependence upon mind and body, and this combination is the basis to which conceptual thinking ascribes a name, I or self or Mary or Harold. This is the you that is sitting and meditating and wondering, do I exist? Whatever exists is necessarily dependent upon causes and conditions or parts and names for its existence. A car, for example, is a collection of pieces of steel, glass, plastic, rubber, an engine, etc., put together by people in a factory. We give the name car to this collection. But if we look for a real, concrete, independently existing car, it cannot be found. So conventionally, things exist dependently. and understanding dependence is the principal cause for understanding their ultimate nature, emptiness. The conventional nature of an object is its dependence upon other things, and its ultimate nature is its emptiness of inherent, independent existence. Think about how your body exists conventionally in dependence upon skin, blood, bones, legs, arms, organs, and so forth. In turn, each of these exists in dependence upon their own parts, cells, atoms, subatomic particles. Think about your mind, how it exists in dependence upon thoughts, feelings, perceptions, sensations. And how in turn each of these exists in dependence upon the previous conscious experiences that gave rise to it. Now go back to your feeling of self or I. Think about how you exist conventionally in dependence upon mind and body and name, the self's parts. When the body feels hungry or cold, for example, you think, I am hungry, I am cold. When the mind has an idea about something, you say, I think. When you feel love for someone, you say, I love you. When introducing yourself, you say, I am so-and-so. Apart from this sense of I that depends upon the ever-flowing, ever-changing streams of body and mind, is there an I that is solid, unchanging and independent? The mere absence of such an inherently existing I is the emptiness of the self. So we finish the session with the conclusion as to how you yourself exists. Conclude by dedicating sincerely any positive energy and insight you may have gained to the enlightenment of all beings, thinking that this meditation is just one step along the path to finally achieving direct insight into emptiness, and thus cutting the root of suffering and dissatisfaction. And then just bring yourself back to the room. So, are there any questions or observations? I did talk about how I was going to, possibly we would do a deity meditation, but we won't have time tonight. And I'm always a little bit, I'm not sure if I want to do that for people that might not be comfortable with it, so it's a tricky one. Deity meditations, like, so all of these images around here are what we refer to as deities. And there are meditations that you can do with all of them. That's 21 taras over there, and there's a prayer that we will often say on Wednesday nights to the 21 taras. This is Chenrezig, the Buddha of Compassion, who all Tibetans, all little children, the first mantra they learn is the Buddha of Compassion mantra, the Om Mani Padme Hum mantra. And so they say that by doing a visualization of the Buddha of Compassion filling you with light and saying the mantra, the resonance of the mantra on your mind stream has a very positive effect, but it increases, it helps with your compassion. It's actually, and any of these deity meditations are like a form of purification as well. So if you visualise any of them, it immediately has a positive effect on your mind. Even just in the fact that you're looking at these images, you're not thinking about negative stuff. So that they say that by meditating on them, you're taking your mind away from negative things, and they have very positive imprints. These images were they were seen by enlightened beings, and they're drawn in a very specific way. You can't freehand draw them. Everything that they're doing is very specific, and that when you meditate on them, that it will work. So that, I remember asking Geshe-Doga, could I do some drawings? And he says, no, not a good idea. If you draw them, you have to draw them perfectly. So that, because you're imprinting onto your mind. So everything that they're doing with their hands actually it's like what I was saying about the ritual stuff earlier. It has a purpose, it has a meaning, and then so when you're meditating on them, you're thinking about those things as well. And I think that there would be no harm in just sort of, because we're not going to do a meditation, but if you just visualise these things filling you with light, it's a really nice thing to do. In a couple of weeks, I can't remember the date. Do you remember the date for the White Tara? 29th of August, 26th of August. So White Tara is the middle tanka over here. Paintings are called tankas in Tibetan. And so White Tara is the deity of health and long life. And every year, Geshe-Doga will give an empowerment. And what that means is, or an initiation, and it kind of sounds like, a bit weird doing an initiation, but what it is, it's a blessing. And by taking the empowerment from a Lama, you are given the blessing to do the meditation that comes with it, and then you'd find out how to do the meditation. It's very similar to the body of light meditation, which we could finish up with, or we could just sort of finish. But it's just that thing of visualising the deity and filling yourself with light, and then by taking an empowerment, you get the blessing of the Lama that comes with it, and it makes it a more powerful practice for you. And there's no commitment with it. You don't have to do it. It's actually a blessing that Geshe is giving to us, really. Each year he does the White Tara, and everyone would, that would be more than welcome to come to that. It is a ritual thing. It's a couple of hours, and there'll be a crowd of people. A lot of people come for it to receive the blessing, and there's a lot of sort of prayers and chanting and stuff, and you might not necessarily understand what's going on, but that's up to you, whether you feel that you're comfortable to come along to something like that. But mostly it's prayers to the Buddhas, it's making offerings. A lot of what they do in these ritual things is visualising lots of offerings, drinking water, washing water, flowers, incense, lights, perfume, food, music. There's a lot of this visualisation of offering things, and that, I think, has a kind of really beautiful effect on your mind as well. So a lot of pujas and things are kind of just like that. And it might seem sort of strange, but when you find out what's going on, it's really quite simple. And he's just giving you the blessings to be able to do the meditations. Yes. The 26th of August? Yeah. So you can read on the board, there's a notice up there about it, but I'm just kind of preparing you that it's about an hour and a half, 2 hours, 10 o'clock in the morning. It's generally at 10 in the morning on a Saturday or a Sunday, and it'll be a couple of hours that you sit in here and go and do this thing. So you know, if you're comfortable, it's a lovely thing to do. And then you're empowered to do the white Tara. And white Tara you can visualise for yourself or for others. It's a nice thing to do. If somebody's sick, you can visualise white Tara above them, filling them with light. And you can say the mantra. It's Om Tare Tu Tare Ture Soha is the mantra. And again, it's the vibrations of the mantra is said to have a positive impact on your mind. But and it's that same thing. It may help the person. Sometimes I think there is a telepathic thing. It's almost like that when you're going to ring someone and they ring you, you pick up the phone and it's that person that you're thinking of, or that it happens quite a lot. You're thinking of someone and they contact you, or you contact them and they go, oh my God, I was just about to ring you, or something like that. I think there is that connection. I think there is that, and I think in these meditations, if you're meditating for others, there is something positive that's put out there, an energy that's sort of sent out there. But fundamentally what you're doing is you're working on your own mind. And that just simply by doing these positive things with these meditations, it's having a very profound effect on your mind and helping you. And then you're in a better position to be able to help others. Yes?
I really enjoyed the session tonight, the meditation. But I'd just like to ask you, in a sentence, if somebody says to you, what is yourself? Your I. What would you say?
So the question is, just for the microphone, what is your I? If somebody asks you, what is yourself, what is your I? Your I, and I'm not a great master, I'm not a great, scholar at these sort of things, but your I exists interdependently with causes and conditions, through causes and conditions. That's how the I does exist. But it interdependently through causes and conditions. And we have, Thich Nhat Hanh again, I was looking at something today and he was saying, it's no good if you're having an argument with your father or your mother, because you are your father and your mother. So it's this kind of like you've separated yourself, you're angry, you're having an argument. But he's saying, actually, you don't exist. If they don't exist, you don't exist. So there is this interdependence with everything and everyone. It's a big subject. It's complicated and it's simple. And the trick with it is to read about it, to listen to teachings on it, and to contemplate. The three things they say: listening, contemplating, meditating. The three things that you do. And there's also the three. My mind is terrible. The three trainings of morality, concentration and wisdom. So these three things of the ethical behaviour helps with your concentration, and then you can think on these subjects deeply with wisdom and achieve this wisdom that understands the emptiness of all phenomena and the emptiness of the self and the emptiness of phenomena. And it's a thing that you need to think about to really get your head around it. When you first hear it, it's like, whoa. But the more you familiarise yourself with it, the more it makes sense and it gets a bit clearer and easier to get a handle on. And it starts to work for you. You don't have to have a direct realisation of emptiness to have an understanding of just this loosening of, you know, of, by not sort of grabbing hold of a situation so tightly and labelling it and creating a fabricated story over it. You do that less and less because you know it doesn't exist that way, that I've just sort of plastered a whole picture over, that somebody else sees completely differently because they're standing over there, but I'm here and I'm seeing it like this, and it is like this. It absolutely is exactly as I'm saying, but the person over there is saying I'm seeing the situation completely differently. So who's right? So it all came from here, it all came from my layering over. And then if you step back and go, all right, peel it back, where is this awful? How do you get a consensus? You still analyse. Does it exist that way? This angry person that is angry at me, do they exist as a totally independently, inherently existing angry person? And you analyse them in the way that we've just analysed, you can't find that person. And you can't find the anger, because the anger itself came from a whole set of causes and conditions on that person that led to that sort of moment. But it doesn't exist inherently there. No. Yep. 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 And I'll just repeat what you're saying. She's saying that it's like nature. It's like a tree growing, and it needs the sun and the water and the air and nutrients to grow. Without those things, it can't exist. So there's a whole, and then it disintegrates. So you think about it over and over, and you just sort of contemplate these things, and they're helpful. All right, I'll let it go there. Cup of tea and cake in the dining room.